The Criterion warships hung in Earth's orbit like metallic vultures circling a dying animal. Their sleek, obsidian hulls reflected no light, making them appear as tears in the fabric of space itself. Inside the lead vessel, Commander Zarthok stood before a holographic display showing Earth's major cities burning. His four arms crossed in satisfaction as his reptilian features twisted into what his species considered a smile. The humans put up more resistance than expected, his lieutenant reported, approaching on 6 insectoid legs. But their military forces have been neutralized. All major population centers are under our control. Zarthok's vertical pupils dilated with pleasure. The galactic hegemony had deemed humanity too dangerous to exist freely. These primitive beings had achieved spaceflight mere decades ago, yet their rate of technological advancement alarmed even the eldest races. Better to subjugate them now before they became a true threat. Begin the harvest protocols, Zarthok commanded. Sort the population by physical capability. The strong will serve in our minds. The weak, he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew the fate of those deemed unfit for labor. On Earth's surface, the reality was far grimmer than any strategic display could convey. Los Angeles lay in ruins, its iconic skyline reduced to twisted metal and shattered glass. Smoke rose from countless fires, creating an artificial twilight even at midday. Alien patrol craft hummed through the ash-filled air, their energy weapons ready to strike down any human who dared show resistance. In what remained of downtown LA, Sarah Chun pressed herself against a collapsed wall, her 7-year-old daughter Maya clutched tightly to her chest. They'd been running for 3 days, ever since the processing centers opened. Sarah had seen neighbors dragged away, heard the screams echoing from the alien structures that appeared overnight. "Mommy, I'm scared," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant explosions. "I know, baby. Just stay quiet," Sarah replied, fighting back her own tears. Her husband had been in the first wave of resistance fighters. She hadn't heard from him since the invasion began. A mechanical whirring made them both freeze. An alien patrol unit rounded the corner, its spider-like form moving with unnatural grace. The Criterion soldiers' heads swiveled, compound eyes scanning for heat signatures. Sarah held her breath, praying Maya would stay silent. The soldier's weapon powered up with a high-pitched whine. It had found them. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in the ruins of Camp Pendleton, something stirred in the rubble. A hand, scarred and calloused, pushed aside a concrete slab. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Tank Thompson emerged from what had been a reinforced bunker, his uniform torn and bloodied but his eyes sharp with purpose. For 3 days, he'd been buried under tons of debris after the aliens' initial bombardment. 3 days of rationing his emergency water, breathing through a miraculous air pocket, and planning. The aliens had made a critical error. They'd assumed their orbital strikes had killed everyone in the military bases. They hadn't counted on marine engineering or sheer stubborn will to survive. Tanks surveyed the devastation around him. The base he'd called home for 15 years was gone. His brothers and sisters in arms, the family he'd chosen, lay scattered among the ruins. But as he stood there, covered in dust and dried blood, something burned inside him hotter than any alien weapon. Rage, pure, focused, marine courage. He reached into the rubble and pulled out his rifle, miraculously intact in its hardened case. Next came his combat gear, battered but functional. As he suited up, memories flooded back. The friends he'd lost in Afghanistan, the oath he'd taken to defend his nation, the promise he'd made to his daughter to always come home. His daughter. Emily would be 17 now. Was she alive? Had she made it to the emergency shelters? The not knowing threatened to break him, but Tank pushed the thoughts aside. A Marine doesn't break. A Marine adapts, overcomes, and accomplishes the mission. And, right now, the mission was simple. Make the aliens regret ever setting foot on Earth. Back in Los Angeles, Sarah's worst nightmare was becoming reality. The Criterion soldier advanced, its weapon trained on them. Maya whimpered, burying her face in her mother's shirt. Sarah stood slowly, pushing Maya behind her. "Please," she begged, knowing the alien likely couldn't understand. She's just a child. The soldier's translator crackled to life. Young ones adapt better to servitude. She will be processed for off-world transport. No. Sarah stepped forward, shielding Maya completely. Take me instead. Leave her alone. The Crytherian's head tilted. A gesture Sarah had learned meant amusement. Emotional attachment. Another human weakness. It raised its weapon. You are not suitable for labor. Your termination will serve as an example. Sarah closed her eyes, waiting for the end. Maya's terrified sob broke her heart. She'd failed to protect her baby. The shot never came. Instead, there was a wet, crunching sound followed by gurgle. Sarah's eyes snapped open to see the alien soldier collapsing, dark ichor pooling around its body. Standing behind, it was a figure that seemed to have stepped out of humanity's legends. A lone warrior, face painted with ash and blood, eyes burning with deadly purpose. Tank wiped his knife clean on the alien's uniform. He'd been tracking this patrol for an hour, waiting for the perfect moment. Finding civilians still alive was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Ma'am, you injured? His voice was gravelly from 3 days without proper water. Sarah shook her head, still in shock. You're military? Muddiness, Mong. Gunnery Sergeant Thompson. He scanned the area with practiced efficiency. This area is about to get hot. That patrol will be missed. You got somewhere safe to go. Safe. Sarah almost laughed. Is anywhere safe anymore? Tank's expression softened slightly. He saw his own daughter and the terrified child peeking out from behind her mother. There's an old subway maintenance tunnel about 2 clicks east. Aliens haven't mapped the old infrastructure yet. Take your daughter and go. Find other survivors. Stay underground. What about you? A ghost of a smile crossed Tank's weathered face. Ma'am, I've got work to do. As Sarah grabbed Maya and ran in the direction he'd indicated, Tank collected the aliens' weapons and equipment. The technology was advanced, but not incomprehensible. Marines were trained to use enemy resources, and he was about to give these bastards a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Over the next hours, Tank moved through the ruined city like death incarnate. He studied the aliens' patrol patterns, noted their communication frequencies, observed their weaknesses. The Crytherians were overconfident, moving in predictable formations, relying too heavily on their technology. They'd conquered dozens of worlds, but they'd never faced a determined human military professional on his home turf. His first major strike came at sunset. A Crytherian processing center had been established in what used to be a shopping mall. Hundreds of humans were caged inside, waiting for transport to slave ships. The facility was guarded by a dozen soldiers and automated defense turrets. Tank had spent hours preparing. Improvised explosives from gathered materials, alien weapons recalibrated for human use, and, most importantly, a plan that relied on the one thing the aliens consistently underestimated: human ingenuity and determination. He started with the power generators. A small explosive charge, placed precisely where alien shielding was weakest, plunged the facility into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in moments later, but those moments were enough. Tank was already inside, moving through shadows with practiced ease. The first guard never saw him coming. Tank's knife found the weak point in the alien's armor, right where their respiratory system was located. He learned that from the patrol soldier. Their anatomy was different, but they still needed to breathe. By the time alarms started blaring, for guards were down, Tank had liberated an alien plasma rifle and was using it to devastating effect. The Crytherians scrambled for cover, shouting in their clicking language, trying to coordinate a response. But Tank had spent years in urban warfare. He knew how to use chaos, how to multiply his effectiveness through superior tactics and positioning. A grenade here, suppressing fire there, always moving, never where they expected. The human prisoners watched in awe as a single Marine systematically dismantled their captors' defenses. Some began to cheer, others wept with relief. When Tank blasted open their cages, many fell to their knees in gratitude. On your feet, Tank barked. This ain't over. Grab any weapon you can find and move out. Subway tunnels, 2 clicks east. Move like your lives depend on it, because they do. As the freed prisoners fled into the night, Tank set his remaining charges. The processing center erupted in a pillar of flame visible for miles. It was a message written in fire and alien blood. Humanity was not beaten, not while even one Marine still drew breath. On the orbiting command ship, alarm screamed. Commander Zarthok stared at the tactical display in disbelief. An entire processing facility destroyed. 12 elite soldiers dead. All evidence pointed to a single human combatant. "This is impossible," his lieutenant chittered nervously. "Our intelligence indicated all military forces were eliminated." Zarthok's claws dug into the command console. "Send a full battalion. I want this human found and brought to me, alive if possible. I need to understand how one primitive soldier could cause such damage." As orders were relayed and drop ships prepared, neither Zarthok nor his staff noticed the small changes beginning to ripple across Earth. In hidden bunkers and collapsed buildings, other survivors were stirring. Military and civilian alike, they'd heard the explosion, seen the fire in the sky. Hope, that most dangerous of human emotions, was spreading like wildfire. Tank, now resting in a concealed position overlooking the city, cleaned his weapons and prepared for the next phase. He knew they'd come for him with overwhelming force. Good. Let them come. Every alien focused on him was one, not hunting civilians. He thought of Emily again, allowing himself just a moment of weakness. Was she watching the sky, wondering if anyone was fighting back? He hoped so. He hoped she knew her father would never stop fighting, never stop making the invaders pay for every human life taken. As dawn approached, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of red and gold, Tank noticed movement in the streets below. Alien drop ships, dozens of them, converging on his area of operations. He smiled grimly and checked his ammunition. They thought they had one. They thought humanity was broken, defeated, ready for chains. They were about to learn why Marines had a saying, "No better friend, no worse enemy." Tank chambered around and prepared to teach the galactic hegemony the price of invading Earth. The aliens had awakened something primal in humanity, something that all their technology and superior numbers couldn't defeat. They had unleashed a United States Marine, and he was just getting started. The Criterion drop ships descended like angry hornets, their anti-gravity engines whining as they dispersed across the ruined cityscape. Battalion Commander Vextor had personally taken command of this operation. No single primitive would make a mockery of the hegemony's might. Deploy in search pattern Theta, Vextor commanded through the neural link connecting him to his soldiers. Thermal scanners at maximum sensitivity. This human has proven resourceful. Assume nothing. Tank watched from his concealed position as alien soldiers poured from the ships. He counted at least 200, armed with plasma rifles and supported by hovering combat drones. They moved with military precision, establishing a perimeter and beginning systematic sweeps. He'd expected this level of response. What he hadn't expected was to see other humans emerging from hiding spots across the city. Word of the processing center's destruction had spread faster than wildfire. Desperate people who'd been hiding for days were starting to believe resistance was possible. Through his salvaged alien scope, Tank spotted a group of civilians attempting to ambush an alien patrol. Their hearts were in the right place, but their execution was suicidal. Baseball bats and hunting rifles against energy shields and plasma weapons. It would be a massacre. Tank had seconds to decide. Stay hidden and maintain his tactical advantage, or reveal his position to save civilians who were inspired by his actions. For a Marine, there was no choice. His first shot took out the patrol's communication node, mounted on the lead soldier's back. The second and third shots disabled their portable shield generator. By the time the aliens realized they were under attack from a different direction, Tank was already moving. Contact. Grid 7-9. Vextor's neural link blazed with incoming reports. The human was engaging multiple units simultaneously, using their own weapons against them with impossible accuracy. Tank sprinted across rooftops, leaping gaps that would have given parkour experts pause. Marine conditioning and sheer determination carried him forward. He fired on the move, each shot carefully placed. The civilians below looked up in wonder as alien soldiers fell around them. "Run!" Tank shouted as he landed among them. Subway tunnels. Now, a young man, probably college age, stood frozen with a baseball bat in his hands. "You're the Marine everyone's talking about. Move your ass, son. This AO's about to get real hot." Tank grabbed the kid and shoved him towards safety as plasma bolts sizzled past. The group scattered, most heading for the tunnels. But the young man and several others stayed, picking up fallen alien weapons. Tank saw the determination in their eyes, the same look he'd seen in fresh recruits ready to prove themselves. "You know how to use those?" Tank asked, already knowing the answer. "Point and shoot, right?" The young man's hand shook, but his jaw was set. Tank made another split-second decision. "Stay low, watch your backgrounds, and don't shoot unless you have a clear target." "What's your name?" "David. David Kim." "All right, David. You're with me. Rest of you spread out, but stay visual. We're going to give these bastards a welcome party they won't forget." What followed was a running battle through the ruins of Los Angeles. Tank led his impromptu squad with the skill of a seasoned NCO, turning civilians into soldiers through necessity and example. They hit and ran, using the urban terrain to their advantage, never staying in one place long enough for the aliens to pin them down. The Krytherians, for all their technological superiority, were struggling. Their tactics were designed for conventional warfare against organized militaries or suppressing primitive populations. They weren't prepared for guerrilla warfare led by a professional warrior who understood both their strengths and weaknesses. "This is intolerable." Vextor raged as another squad reported casualties. "How is one human causing such chaos?" "Commander," his aide ventured carefully, "the human appears to have recruited local inhabitants. Our forces are reporting multiple contacts. Impossible." The population was pacified, but the evidence was undeniable. Across the city, inspired by Tank's initial success, pockets of resistance were forming. Former soldiers, police officers, and everyday citizens were emerging from hiding. They'd seen alien soldiers die, seen them bleed. The invaders were not invincible. In an abandoned parking garage, Tank paused to catch his breath and check on his makeshift squad. They'd lost 2 people in the last engagement, but the survivors were hardening. David had proven particularly adept, displaying natural tactical awareness. "Sergeant," David approached, using the title with earned respect. "I've been thinking, the aliens rely heavily on their comms, right? What if we could disrupt them?" Tank raised an eyebrow. "Go on. I was an electrical engineering student at UCLA. Before all this, if I could get my hands on one of their intact comm units, maybe I could figure out how to jam their frequencies." Tank clapped him on the shoulder. "Outstanding, Marine." David blinked. "I'm not a Marine. Son, you're fighting for your home alongside a Marine. Today, that makes you one of us." Tank turned to address the group. "Listen up. We got a new objective. We need intact alien tech, specifically communication equipment. But remember, survival first, heroic second. Can't fight if you're dead." Meanwhile, in the subway tunnels, Sarah Chun had become an unlikely leader among the refugees. The maintenance tunnels Tank had directed them to connected to a larger network, and they'd found hundreds of survivors already sheltering there. But without organization, fear and desperation were taking hold. "We need to set up proper defensive positions," Sarah argued to a group that had declared themselves in charge. "That Marine bought us time, but they'll find us eventually." "What do you know about it?" sneered a man who'd introduced himself as a former city councilman. "You're just a teacher. A teacher who survived up there for 3 days and watched a Marine take down aliens with nothing but skill and determination," Sarah shot back. "We can sit here and wait to be captured, or we can prepare to defend ourselves." Maya tugged at her mother's hand. "The Marine was brave, Mommy. We should be brave too." Sometimes it took a child's simple wisdom to cut through adult fears. Gradually, people began to listen. Sarah organized work parties to barricade entrances, establish lookouts, and even started basic combat training using techniques she'd observed from Tank. Above ground, the battle was intensifying. Vextor had called in aerial support, and Krytherian fighter craft, now prowled the skies. But Tank had anticipated this escalation. Using captured alien explosives, he prepared several surprises in key buildings. When the first fighter swooped low for a strafing run, Tank detonated charges in a partially collapsed skyscraper. Tons of debris erupted skyward, catching the craft in a deadly cloud of concrete and steel. The fighter spun out of control, crashing into another building in a ball of green flame. "Yeah, get some," David shouted, pumping his fist. "Stay focused," Tank warned, but he allowed himself a small smile. The kid was developing good combat instincts. "They'll respond with." His words were cut off as the ground shook. Orbital bombardment. The Critherians were done playing games. Buildings vaporized under beams of coherent energy fired from space. Tank grabbed David and dove for cover as the world exploded around them. When the barrage stopped, entire city blocks had been reduced to glass and ash. "Everyone sound off," Tank called out, ears ringing. One by one, his improvised squad checked in. They'd lost more people, but the core group survived. As they emerged from cover, Tank saw something that made his blood run cold. The bombardment had opened several subway entrances, exposing the tunnel system. "They know," David breathed. "They know where the civilians are hiding." Tank's mind raced. The aliens would send forces into the tunnels. Hundreds, maybe thousands of innocent people would be slaughtered or enslaved. Unless... Change of plans, Tank announced. "David, take whoever's willing and get to the tunnels. Warn them and help set up defenses. I'll buy you time. What are you going to do?" Tank checked his liberated plasma rifle and remaining explosives. What Marines do best: draw fire and raise hell. David started to protest, but something in Tank's eyes stopped him. This was what warriors did: put themselves between danger and those they protected. "It's been an honor, Sergeant." "Likewise, Marine. Now move out." As David led the volunteers toward the exposed tunnels, Tank turned to face the approaching Critherian forces. He was one man against an alien army, but he was a United States Marine. He'd faced impossible odds before in the mountains of Afghanistan, in the streets of Fallujah. This was just another day at the office. Tank sprinted toward the largest concentration of alien forces, firing as he ran. His presence was magnetic, drawing their attention like moths to a flame. Energy beams crisscrossed the air around him as he ducked, rolled, and returned fire with deadly accuracy. On the command ship, Zarthok watched the tactical display with growing unease. One human was tying down an entire battalion, causing casualties that should have been impossible. Worse, reports were flooding in from across the planet. The human's actions had sparked widespread resistance. Processing centers burned, patrols went missing, and the conquered population was remembering how to fight. "Perhaps we underestimated them," his lieutenant suggested quietly. Zarthok's tail lashed in anger. "They're primitives. One soldier does not change that." But privately, the commander was beginning to wonder. They'd conquered species with greater numbers, more advanced technology, even hive minds with perfect coordination. Yet none had shown this level of adaptability, this refusal to accept defeat. Back on Earth, Tank had turned an abandoned office building into a fortress. He moved from floor to floor, window to window, making each shot count. The Critherians tried to pin him down, but he always stayed one step ahead. Years of combat experience merged with desperate innovation as he turned their own weapons against them. A plasma grenade took out a squad attempting to breach the ground floor. Improvised traps using alien power cells created explosive surprises. And always, the precisely aimed shots that found weak points in armor, dropped officers, and sowed chaos in their ranks. But even Marines had limits. Tank's ammunition was running low, his body pushed beyond exhaustion. A glancing plasma bolt had burned through his armor, leaving a painful wound along his ribs. Still, he fought on, buying precious minutes for the civilians in the tunnels. In those tunnels, David had arrived to find Sarah already organizing defenses. The teacher and the engineering student quickly realized they made an effective team. While Sarah positioned fighters at choke points, David worked frantically to understand the captured alien technology. I think I've got it, David exclaimed, holding up a modified comm unit. It won't jam them completely, but it should cause interference, maybe confuse their coordination. Sarah nodded. Do it. Anything that gives us an edge. As David activated his improvised jammer, the effect was immediate. Crytherian soldiers in the tunnels suddenly found their neural links filled with static. Their coordinated advance faltered as individual units lost contact with each other. Now, Sarah commanded. The tunnel defenders opened fire with everything they had. Alien weapons, human firearms, improvised explosives, a desperate barrage that caught the confused invaders off guard. It wasn't a military victory, but it was enough to force them back, to prove that humanity wouldn't go quietly into servitude. Above, Tank noticed the change in alien tactics. Their movements became less coordinated, more hesitant. Whatever was happening in the tunnels was working. Pride swelled in his chest. Even without training, humans were natural fighters when protecting their own. But his position was becoming untenable. Crytherian forces had surrounded the building, and he could hear them breaching lower floors. Tank made his way to the roof, looking out over the burning city. In the distance, he could see more drop ships approaching. Reinforcements. He keyed the alien comm unit he'd kept, broadcasting on an open channel. Attention, Alien Commander. This is Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Thompson, United States Marine Corps. You want me? Come and get me. The challenge sent ripples through the Crytherian command structure. Vextor himself decided to respond. Surrender, human. You have fought well, but further resistance is pointless. Tank laughed, a harsh sound that carried across the channel. Surrender? Son, I don't think you understand. I'm a Marine. We don't know the meaning of the word. He armed his remaining explosives, setting them for a dead man's switch. If he was going down, he'd take as many of them with him as possible. But as he prepared for his last stand, movement in the streets below caught his eye. Humans. Dozens, then hundreds, emerging from buildings, tunnels, and ruins. They carried alien weapons, makeshift shields, and, most importantly, determination. David was among them, leading a group of tunnel defenders. Sarah was there too, Maya protected behind a wall of volunteers. They were coming to his aid. Negative, negative. Tank broadcast to them. Get back to cover. But they kept coming. His actions had shown them something crucial. The aliens could be fought. They could be beaten. And no one fought alone. Vextor watched in disbelief as his forces reported contact from multiple directions. The humans weren't military. Most barely knew how to use the weapons they carried. But they kept coming, waves of them, protecting their lone warrior. This is madness, he muttered. They'll all die. Commander, his aide said quietly. Respectfully, I don't think they care. And that was the moment the Crytherians truly began to understand what they'd awakened. Humans didn't fight because they thought they'd win. They fought because some things were worth dying for. Freedom. Home. Each other. Tank watched the swelling crowd of defenders with a mixture of pride and horror. They were brave, but bravery alone wouldn't stop plasma rifles. He had to act, had to give them something more than just inspiration. Listen up, people, he roared, his Marine drill instructor voice carrying over the chaos. You want to fight? Then fight smart, building corners for cover, intersecting fields of fire. Watch your six, and support your buddies. Today, you're all Marines. And miraculously, they listened. The mob became a militia, rough and untrained but coordinated. They forced the Crytherians to fight for every inch, made them pay in blood for every advance. On the command ship, Zarthok received reports from across the planet. Similar scenes were playing out everywhere. Military survivors were emerging, leading civilian populations in resistance. The easy conquest had become a quagmire. Your orders, Commander? His lieutenant asked. Zarthok was silent for a long moment. They could glass the entire planet, but that would defeat the purpose of conquest. They needed the humans as slaves, not ash. But continuing this ground war against an increasingly organized resistance. Recall Battalion Commander Vextor, he finally ordered. We need a new strategy. The recall order reached Vextor as his forces engaged the human militia. Part of him was relieved. This was becoming a bloodbath. But His warrior's pride burned at retreating from primitives. "All units, fall back to extraction points," he commanded reluctantly. Tank watched the aliens retreating with suspicion. This wasn't victory, it was a tactical withdrawal. They'd be back, probably with worse. But, for now, the immediate threat was passing. As the drop ships lifted off, a ragged cheer rose from the human defenders. They'd stood against the alien war machine and survived. It was a small victory, but after days of defeat and despair, it felt like everything. Tank made his way down from his position, trying to ignore the pain from his wounds. The crowd parted before him, looking at him with something approaching awe. He found David and Sarah in the crowd, both looking exhausted but triumphant. "Outstanding work, both of you," he said simply. "We learn from the best," David replied. Sarah stepped forward, Maya still clinging to her hand. "What happens now?" Tank looked around at the gathered survivors, his accidental army. They were bloodied, scared. Most had lost everything. But in their eyes, he saw something the aliens had failed to kill. Hope, determination, the warrior spirit that lived in every human heart. Now, Tank's weathered face split into a fierce grin. "Now we teach these alien bastards why you don't mess with Earth. We got work to do, people." This was just round one. As the sun set over the ruins of Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the devastation, humanity's resistance was born. One Marine had shown them the way. Now, millions would follow. The Krytherians thought they had won. They destroyed Earth's militaries, captured its cities, broken its governments. But they'd failed to understand a fundamental truth about humanity. You can knock humans down, but they get back up. You could take their weapons, and they'd make new ones. You could destroy their homes, and they'd fight from the ruins. And if you were foolish enough to attack their planet, to threaten their children, to push them to the very brink of extinction, they would remind you why humans had clawed their way to the top of their world's food chain in the first place. The real war was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Los Angeles, as the survivors had begun calling it. What started as one Marine's desperate last stand had evolved into something neither human nor Krytherian had anticipated, a global insurgency that grew stronger by the day. In the tunnel networks beneath the city, humanity had built more than just shelters. They'd created a functioning underground society. Tank stood in what they designated as Command Central, a former subway maintenance facility converted into a military headquarters. Maps covered the walls, marked with alien positions, supply routes, and resistance cells. "Report," Tank said as David entered, no longer the frightened college student, but a seasoned resistance fighter. "Good news and bad news," David replied, setting down a salvaged alien datapad. "Good news. We've established contact with 17 other major resistance cells across the country. The network you envisioned is becoming reality." Tank nodded. After the aliens' tactical withdrawal, he'd immediately begun organizing. Not just locally, but thinking strategically. If humanity was going to survive, they needed coordination, communication, and, most importantly, hope. The bad news. David's expression darkened. Intercepted Krytherian communications suggest they're bringing in specialist units. Something called Pacification Corps. And, Tank, they're not taking prisoners anymore. The room fell silent. Everyone present understood the implications. The Krytherians were done trying to enslave humanity. Now they wanted extermination. "Then we'd better step up our game," Tank said, his voice steady despite the weight on his shoulders. "Sarah, how's the training program?" Sarah Chun, now his second-in-command, looked up from her own reports. In 3 weeks, the former elementary school teacher had transformed into a formidable military leader. Necessity had forged her into something harder, though Tank could still see compassion in her eyes when she looked at the child refugees. "We're processing 100 new fighters daily," she reported. "Basic weapons training, small unit tactics, guerrilla warfare fundamentals. Not Marine Corps standard, but effective enough. The alien weapons help. Even children can use them effectively with minimal training." Tank winced at the mention of children, but Sarah continued before he could object. "I know what you're thinking, but we can't afford to be selective. Everyone who can fight needs to fight. We've established age minimums. No one under 16 in combat roles. The younger ones help with support, intelligence gathering, running messages. It went against everything Tank believed about protecting innocents, but Sarah was right. This wasn't a conventional war with conventional rules. This was survival. Speaking of intelligence, David interjected, we've had a breakthrough. Remember that Criterion officer we captured last week? Tank's eyes sharpened. They'd managed to take a wounded alien alive during a supply convoy raid. The creature had been surprisingly forthcoming once it realized the humans weren't the savages its propaganda claimed. Subcommander Kexval has been cooperative, David continued. He's confirmed what we suspected. Earth isn't the Criterion's first conquest, but we're the first to mount this level of resistance. Apparently, most species either surrender immediately when faced with orbital bombardment or fight conventionally and lose quickly. They've never faced asymmetric warfare. Never like this. Kexval says the hegemony is actually debating whether to continue the occupation. We're costing them more resources than anticipated. Tank felt a spark of hope, quickly tempered by realism. They could still glass the planet if they wanted. Yes, but that's the key. They don't want to. Earth's biosphere is valuable, and they need slave labor for their empire. Dead humans serve no purpose. A runner burst into the command center, one of the teenagers they used for communication since the aliens monitored all electronic signals. Sergeant Thompson, major attack on the Denver resistance cell. They need immediate support. Tank was moving before the kid finished speaking. David, coordinate with any cells within striking distance. Sarah, prep our rapid response teams. If they're hitting Denver, they're testing our reaction capabilities. Within minutes, Tank led a strike force through the tunnel systems. They'd mapped hundreds of miles of forgotten infrastructure, storm drains, maintenance tunnels, old mining shafts. The aliens' advanced sensors had trouble penetrating deep earth and rock, giving humans a mobility advantage they exploited ruthlessly. They emerged in the ruins of what had been a thriving city, now another casualty of alien occupation. The sounds of battle echoed through empty streets, plasma fire, explosions, and human screams. Tank's team moved with practiced efficiency. 3 weeks of constant combat had turned desperate civilians into effective fighters. They bounded from cover to cover, using hand signals and maintaining noise discipline. When they reached the battle zone, Tank's heart sank. The Denver cell was being systematically destroyed by Criterion forces unlike any they'd seen before. These weren't regular soldiers, but specialized units equipped with heavier armor and weapons that seemed designed specifically to counter human guerrilla tactics. Pacification Corps, David whispered beside him. Tank observed their tactics. They moved in overlapping shields, used sonic weapons to disorient defenders, and employed seeker drones that hunted humans through rubble. Professional, methodical, lethal. But they'd made one mistake. They focused entirely on the cell they were destroying, not expecting external reinforcement. Tank smiled grimly. Time to introduce them to Marine Corps doctrine, violence of action. Listen up, he whispered to his team. We hit them hard and fast. Target their shield generators first, then their officers. David, your tech team disrupts their drones. Sarah, take your squad and flank left. We punch a hole and get our people out. This isn't about winning. It's about making them bleed for every inch. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. Tank's plasma rifle found the weak spot in a shield generator, causing it to explode in a shower of sparks. Sarah's team launched improvised EMP grenades that sent drones spiraling from the sky. David's fighters, using modified alien tech, turned the Pacification Corps' own communications against them, flooding their networks with false data. The elite Criterion units stumbled, their perfect coordination shattered. Denver's surviving fighters took advantage, pouring fire into exposed positions. But these aliens adapted quickly, falling back into defensive positions and returning fire with disciplined precision. Tank found himself in a firefight with a Pacification Corps officer, trading shots across a debris-strewn plaza. The alien's armor absorbed hits that would have killed a regular soldier, while its return fire came dangerously close to Tank's position. Then, Tank noticed something, a pattern in the officer's movements. It favored its right side, possibly due to their species' anatomy. Tank feinted left, drawing fire, then rolled right, and put 3 shots into the alien's exposed flank. Dark Ichor sprayed as it fell. Fall back, Tank commanded as more Crytherian reinforcements arrived. Objective complete. The combined resistance cells retreated into the tunnels, having rescued 40 Denver fighters from certain death. But the cost had been high. 12 killed, many more wounded. And they'd learned a harsh lesson about the Pacification Corps' capabilities. Back in the command center, Tank convened an emergency meeting. Leaders from other cells joined via secure communication lines they'd established using a combination of old human tech and modified alien equipment. We need to adapt, Tank began. The Pacification Corps represents a new threat level. Anyone have intel? A voice crackled through from the New York cell. Colonel Mitchell here. We've engaged them twice. Lost half our fighters. But we've noticed something. They're not infinite. Each pacification unit seems specialized for specific combat scenarios. Urban warfare, tunnel clearing, open terrain. They can't be everywhere at once. So we make them choose their battles, Sarah suggested. Hit multiple targets simultaneously. Force them to spread their elite units thin. Exactly, Tank agreed. But we need more than tactics. We need a strategic goal beyond just survival. What about their ships? This from the Houston cell. If we could capture one intact. Tank had been thinking the same thing. So far, they'd only destroyed Crytherian equipment. But if they could capture and operate their technology, it would change everything. It's worth the risk, he decided. All cells begin gathering intel on isolated ships. Small ones first, scouts, transports. We learn their systems, then work our way up. Over the following days, the resistance adapted once again. Instead of direct confrontations with Pacification Corps units, they used misdirection, false intelligence, and decoys. When the elite aliens deployed to one location, 3 others were hit simultaneously. Tank personally led a mission that would have seemed impossible weeks before. Intelligence indicated a damaged Crytherian scout ship had landed for repairs in the Mojave Desert, protected by only a standard security detail. His team approached at night, using old Marine Corps desert warfare tactics adapted for alien enemies. They'd learned the Crytherians relied heavily on technological superiority, but had vulnerabilities. Their night vision systems could be overloaded by sudden flares. Their armor joints became brittle in extreme cold, which the desert night provided. The assault was textbook. Snipers took out sentries, sappers disabled alarms, and the main force swept through like a desert storm. Within minutes, the ship was theirs. Can you fly this thing? Tank asked David, who was already interfacing with the control systems. Give me time, David muttered, his engineering background finally getting full use. The basic principles seem similar to got it. Automated systems are extensive. Manual control is possible, but limited. Good enough. We need to, alarm screamed. Crytherian reinforcements were already responding. Tank made a command decision that would define the next phase of the war. Everyone aboard. We're taking this thing airborne. As David frantically worked the controls, resistance fighters piled into the scout ship. It lifted off just as Pacification Corps drop ships appeared on the horizon. Tank manned what he hoped was a weapons station, managing to fire several shots that discouraged immediate pursuit. Where to? David asked, sweat beading his forehead as he fought unfamiliar controls. Home, Tank replied. Time to show our people that we can do more than just survive. The captured ship's arrival at the Los Angeles tunnels caused a sensation. For weeks, humans had watched alien craft dominate their skies with impunity. Now, one of those ships bore crude human markings and landed in hidden locations marked by resistance beacons. Word spread like wildfire through the global network. Humanity had captured alien technology. They could fight back in the skies as well as on the ground. Hope, that dangerous emotion the Crytherians had tried to crush, blazed brighter than ever. In his command ship, Commander Zarthok received the news with something approaching disbelief. They stole one of our ships. A damaged scout vessel, his lieutenant confirmed. But yes, Initial reports suggest a human is actually piloting it, albeit crudely. Zarthok's forearms clenched in frustration. Every solution bred new problems. The pacification core had slowed the resistance, but not stopped it. Now, the humans had aerospace capability, however, limited. Contact the Hegemony Council, he ordered finally. Request permission for Protocol 7. His lieutenant's compound eyes widened. Commander, Protocol 7 is reserved for species deemed irredeemably hostile to galactic order. It would mean total genetic cleansing. Yes. Zarthok's expression was grim. These humans have proven they cannot be conquered, only destroyed. Better to end this cleanly than watch our empire bleed resources in prolonged conflict. The request was transmitted to the Galactic Hegemony's ruling council, light years away. The response would take time, but Zarthok was confident it would be approved. No species had ever warranted Protocol 7 before, but no species had resisted like humans. On Earth, unaware of the existential threat now hanging over their planet, the Resistance celebrated their captured ship. Tank stood before a gathering of cell leaders, both in person and via secured communications. This changes our capabilities, but not our mission, he reminded them. We're still outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy with resources we can barely imagine. But we've proven something important. They're not gods. They bleed, they make mistakes, and their technology can be taken and used against them. What's our next move? Asked Sarah, ever practical. Tank had been a sergeant, trained to follow orders and execute tactics. Now he found himself thinking like a general, planning strategy for an entire species' survival. We expand our operations. Every captured weapon, every stolen vehicle, every piece of intelligence brings us closer to driving them off our world. But more than that, we need to give people something to fight for beyond mere survival. He gestured to the rough map of Earth on the wall. I want to establish free zones. Areas where humans can live without fear, farm food, raise children. We're not just fighters, we're human beings. We need to remember what we're fighting to preserve. The room erupted in discussion. Some argued it was too risky, that concentrating populations would make them targets. Others saw the wisdom. Permanent resistance required sustainable infrastructure. The Viet Cong had villages supporting them, Tank pointed out. The Afghan Mujahideen had tribal areas. Every successful insurgency needs a population base. We protect these zones with everything we have, make them symbols that life continues despite the occupation. As plans took shape, Tank noticed Maya, Sarah's daughter, peeking around a corner. The little girl had become something of a mascot for the tunnels. Her innocent questions and stubborn optimism reminding hardened fighters what they protected. Hey there, little Marine, Tank called out gently. Maya approached, no longer the terrified child from 3 weeks ago. Mr. Tank, when are we going to win? The room fell silent. It was the question everyone thought, but rarely voiced. Tank knelt to her level, choosing his words carefully. I don't know when, he admitted, but I know we will. You know why? Because we're fighting for our home. For you and all the other children to grow up free. And humans don't give up when fighting for what matters. Maya nodded solemnly, then surprised him with a hug before running back to the civilian areas. Tank stood, finding every eye in the room on him. She's right to ask, he said. We need to think beyond resistance to victory. Not just surviving the Critherians, but defeating them, driving them from our world, and making sure they never come back. That's impossible, someone muttered. So if it was destroying a processing center alone, Tank countered. So is organizing global resistance in 3 weeks. So is stealing their ship. We've specialized in impossible. Time to aim higher. David cleared his throat. Actually, about that. I've been studying the captured ships' databases. The Critherians aren't invulnerable. They've lost conflicts before, always to coalitions of species working together. They rely on isolating and overwhelming individual worlds. But we're isolated, Sarah pointed out. For now, David agreed. But their technology includes faster-than-light communication. If we could get a message out, let other species know that humans are resisting successfully. The implications were staggering. Potential allies among the stars. The possibility of turning Earth's fight into a wider rebellion against the hegemony. Long-term goal, Tank decided. For now, we focus on building our strength. Every day we survive is a victory. Every alien we kill is one less oppressing another world. We're going to make Earth such a hard target that the cost of holding it exceeds its value. As the meeting dispersed, leaders returning to their cells with renewed purpose, Tank found himself alone with Sarah in the command center. "You've changed," she observed. 3 weeks ago, you were a lone warrior seeking revenge. Now you're a leader giving people hope. Tank's weathered face showed a rare moment of vulnerability. "I was ready to die, taking as many of them with me as possible. Then I saw you and Maya, saw others willing to fight. Couldn't let that go to waste. Your daughter would be proud." Tank's jaw tightened. He'd received word through the Resistance network. Emily was alive, fighting with the Seattle cell. The knowledge gave him strength, but also fear. Every parent in the Resistance lived with the same duality, proud of their children's courage while terrified for their safety. "We're going to win this," Sarah said quietly. "I didn't believe it first, but watching you, seeing what we've built, we're going to win." Tank nodded, looking at the maps and plans covering the walls. 3 weeks from a single Marine's last stand to a global insurgency. From desperate civilians to trained fighters. From certain defeat to growing hope. "We are," he agreed. "Because we have to. Because the alternative isn't acceptable. And because we're human, too stubborn to know when we're beaten and too angry to quit." Outside, in the tunnels that had become humanity's lifeline, life continued. Children attended makeshift schools where they learned history alongside weapons maintenance. Hydroponic gardens grew food in artificial light. Workshops produced ammunition and modified alien technology. Hospitals treated wounded fighters and delivered babies who would know no world but resistance. It wasn't the life anyone had chosen, but it was life nonetheless. Human life, defiant and determined, adapting and overcoming. The Chrytherians had expected to break humanity's spirit with overwhelming force. Instead, they forged it into something harder than diamond and sharper than any blade. In space, Zarthok awaited the Hegemony Council's response about Protocol 7. He studied reports of human resistance with growing unease. No pattern held, no tactic worked consistently. Just when they adapted to one human strategy, 3 new ones emerged. His species had conquered worlds for millennia, building an empire on the assumption that all beings would eventually accept subjugation over extinction. But these humans seemed to prefer death to slavery, and, worse, they were getting better at avoiding both. A junior officer approached hesitantly. "Commander, we're intercepting increased communication between resistance cells. They're planning something major." "Of course they are," Zarthok muttered. In 3 weeks, he'd gone from dismissing humans as primitives to respecting them as the most dangerous enemies the hegemony had faced. Double all security protocols, and prepare evacuation plans for essential personnel. Evacuation? But, Commander, surely they cannot truly threaten US? Zarthok turned all 4 eyes on his subordinate. 3 weeks ago, I would have agreed. Now I prepare for any possibility. These humans have taught me that underestimating them is potentially fatal. Back on Earth, Tank stood on a concealed observation post, watching the stars through a captured alien scope. Somewhere up there, enemy commanders plotted humanity's destruction. Down here, humans plotted survival and victory. The scope's advanced optics revealed something interesting. Increased activity among the Chrytherian fleet. Ships moving, reorganizing. They were planning something big. Good. Let them come. Tank had plans of his own. The resistance had been born from one Marine's refusal to surrender. It had grown through courage, sacrifice, and sheer human stubbornness. Now it was about to evolve again, from desperate insurgency to something that would shake the foundations of the galactic hegemony itself. The aliens thought they had won when they destroyed Earth's conventional forces. They thought they could crush human spirit with superior technology. They thought wrong. They'd unleashed a Marine, and that Marine had unleashed humanity's true potential. The storm was gathering, and when it broke, the galaxy itself would tremble. The message from the Galactic Hegemony Council arrived, as Zarthok expected, but its contents surprised even him. Protocol 7 was approved, but with conditions. The Council wanted a final demonstration of human intransigence before authorizing complete genetic cleansing. They demanded one last attempt at negotiation. Negotiate with primitives who refuse to accept reality? Zarthok's tail lashed in frustration. The Council's orders are specific, his lieutenant reminded him. We must offer terms. If rejected, Protocol 7 proceeds immediately. Zarthok considered his options. Perhaps this could work to their advantage. Crush the humans' leadership in one strike while appearing to follow diplomatic protocols. Prepare a message. We'll offer to meet with their leaders. When they gather, we eliminate them all. On Earth, Tank studied the intercepted transmission with deep suspicion. After weeks of monitoring Criterion communications, they'd broken enough of their code to understand basic messages. This one was clearly meant to be found. It's obviously a trap, Sarah stated, voicing what everyone was thinking. Of course it is, Tank agreed. But it's also an opportunity. They want to meet with Resistance leadership. That means they acknowledge we have leadership. We're no longer just scattered survivors in their eyes. David looked up from his analysis of the technical data. The proposed meeting site is interesting. Neutral ground, they claim. The ruins of the United Nations building in New York. Symbolic, Tank mused. They want to show they understand human concepts of diplomacy while demonstrating their superiority by meeting where our old governments failed. The debate raged for hours. Some cell leaders argued it was too dangerous. Others saw potential for intelligence gathering. Finally, Tank made a decision that surprised everyone. We go, but not as they expect. He outlined a plan that was audacious even by Resistance standards. They would attend the negotiation, but with safeguards and surprises the Criterions couldn't anticipate. It would require precise timing, incredible courage, and a willingness to risk everything on one coordinated operation. You're talking about exposing our entire command structure, Sarah protested. No, tan directive. I'm talking about showing them that killing our leaders won't stop us. That we're not an organization dependent on a few individuals, but a movement of millions. And if we pull this off, we send a message across the galaxy. Preparations began immediately. Across the globe, Resistance cells mobilized for what many believed would be their final operation. Tank personally selected the team that would accompany him to New York, choosing not just fighters but symbols of human resilience. Sarah would come, representing the transformation of civilians into warriors. David would demonstrate human adaptability with technology. They'd bring doctors who'd learned to treat alien weapon wounds, engineers who'd turned Criterion equipment against its makers, and children who'd grown up in the Resistance. Most importantly, they'd bring survivors from every corner of Earth, every ethnicity and nation, united in defiance of alien rule. If this was humanity's last statement, it would show who they truly were. The journey to New York took 3 days through underground networks and hidden routes. They traveled in captured alien vehicles, modified with human controls and masked from Criterion sensors. Along the way, they gathered more volunteers, people who understood this might be a one-way trip, but came anyway. Tank stood in the assembled crowd the night before the meeting, looking at faces that had hardened from suffering but still showed hope. He'd started as one Marine making a stand. Now, he commanded an army of survivors who'd chosen to be warriors. Tomorrow, we face our enemy not with weapons, but with words, he addressed them. They expect us to cower, to beg, to accept slavery as the price of survival. Instead, we'll show them who humans really are. Not through violence, but through our refusal to break, our unity in the face of extinction, our determination to remain free. And if they attack, someone called out. Tank's smile was grim. Then we execute Plan B. And they learn why humans have a saying. Mess with the best, die like the rest. Dawn broke gray and cold over the ruins of New York. The once proud skyline lay broken, but the remains of the UN building stood like a monument to failed peace. Criterion forces had cleared a perimeter, their weapons trained on approach routes. Tank's convoy emerged from the tunnels exactly at the appointed time. No skulking or hiding. They drove openly through the streets in their captured vehicles, humanity's patchwork flag flying proudly. The aliens tracked them, but didn't fire, apparently surprised by the brazen approach. The human delegation dismounted in full view of the Critherians. Tank had insisted on military precision. Everyone wore some form of uniform, cobbled together from military surplus and resistance gear. They marched in formation, children in the center protected by adults, wounded veterans refusing help as they limped proudly forward. Commander Zarthok waited in what had been the General Assembly Hall, backed by Pacification Corps elites. His four eyes widened slightly at the human display. He'd expected desperate rebels. Instead, he faced an organized force that moved with purpose and dignity. "I am Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Thompson, speaking for Earth's resistance," Tank announced, his voice carrying across the ruined hall. "We're here to discuss terms." Terms. Zarthok's translator conveyed his amusement. "You are in no position to dictate terms, primitive. You are here to accept unconditional surrender or face complete extinction." Extinction. Tank's voice remained steady. "Commander, you've been trying to extinct us for over a month. How's that working out for you?" Gasps came from the Critherian delegation. No conquered species had ever spoken to a hegemony commander with such disrespect. Zarthok's claws extended involuntarily before he controlled himself. "Your defiance has cost you dearly," Zarthok stated. "Millions dead, your civilization in ruins. Accept servitude, and the suffering ends. Continue resistance, and we implement Protocol 7, complete genetic cleansing of your species." "Let me make sure I understand," Tank said, stepping forward despite weapons tracking his movement. "Our choices are slavery or death." "Essentially, yes." Tank nodded as if considering. Then he turned to address not just Zarthok, but the recording devices he knew were present, the ones that would transmit this meeting across the hegemony. "Then, on behalf of humanity, I give you our answer, no." The single word echoed through the hall. Tank continued before Zarthok could respond. "No to slavery. No to extinction. No to accepting that might makes right. You came to our world uninvited, destroyed our cities, killed our families, and now you're surprised we won't thank you for the privilege? Commander, with all due respect, go to hell. You doom your entire species." Zarthok snarled. "Maybe," Tank acknowledged, "but we'll die as humans, free, defiant, and spitting in your face every step of the way. You want to implement Protocol 7? Go ahead. But know this, every human you kill becomes a martyr. Every city you destroy becomes a monument to resistance. And every species in your empire will see that it's possible to say no to the hegemony." Sarah stepped forward, Maya at her side. "You talk about genetic cleansing like it's just policy. This is my daughter. She's 7 years old. She likes to draw pictures and sing songs. She had to learn to field strip a plasma rifle before she learned multiplication. You did that. You turned our children into soldiers, and now you're shocked they won't surrender?" David joined them. "We've studied your history. You've conquered hundreds of worlds by breaking their spirit first. But humans are different. The harder you squeeze, the more we resist. It's not logical, it's not practical, but it's who we are." One by one, members of the delegation spoke. Doctors described treating victims of alien weapons. Teachers talked about educating children in bunkers. Former soldiers explained how they'd trained civilians to fight. Each testimony built a picture of a species that thrived on adversity, that found strength in unity, that would rather die standing than live kneeling. Zarthok listened with growing unease. This wasn't going according to plan. He'd expected pleading or futile attacks, not this calm recitation of human determination. Worse, he could feel doubt creeping through his own forces. Several junior officers were exchanging uncertain glances. "Enough," he finally roared. "Your speeches change nothing. You have refused terms. Protocol 7 will commence immediately. Your species will be eradicated from the galaxy." "About that," Tank said calmly. "See, we figured you'd say something like that. So we prepared a response." David activated a device he'd been carrying. Suddenly, every screen in the facility lit up with footage from around the world. Resistance cells emerging from hidden bases. Captured alien vehicles marked with human symbols. Thousands, tens of thousands, millions of humans standing in defiance. This is being broadcast on every frequency we could access, David explained, including your own communication networks. Every world in your empire is seeing this. Humanity stands united against you. But that wasn't the real surprise. Tank raised his hand, and outside, the sound of engines filled the air. Not Criterion engines, human ones. Military vehicles that had been hidden, protected, and maintained rolled into view. Tanks, armored personnel carriers, even a few helicopters that had been painstakingly repaired. "You thought you destroyed our military," Tank said. "You were wrong. We just went underground, trained others, and waited." Every veteran became an instructor. Every surviving piece of equipment became a training tool. You didn't defeat Earth's armed forces. You spread them through the entire population. Zarthok's security detail tensed as more human forces appeared. Not attacking, just positioning, showing strength. The message was clear. This meeting was on humanity's terms, not the hegemony's. Impossible, Zarthok breted. Our intelligence indicated. Your intelligence was wrong, Tank interrupted. Just like your assessment of humanity. You see individuals to be conquered. We see families to protect. You value order and submission. We value freedom and choice. You thought superior technology guaranteed victory. We showed you that will and determination matter more. The standoff stretched taut. Criterion weapons remained trained on the human delegation, while outside, human forces held position. It would take only one nervous trigger to start a bloodbath. Then, something unexpected happened. Maya pulled free from her mother and walked forward directly towards Zarthok. Sarah started to grab her, but Tank held her back, sensing something important was happening. The little girl stopped just out of reach of the alien commander's claws and looked up at him with innocent eyes. "Why do you hate us?" she asked simply. Zarthok found himself speechless. In all his years of conquest, no one had ever asked him why. They'd pleaded, threatened, bargained, but never questioned the fundamental premise. "We don't hate you," he finally answered. "You are simply incompatible with galactic order." "But why?" Maya persisted with a child's relentless logic. "We didn't hurt anyone before you came. We were learning, growing. Maybe we could have been friends." "The hegemony doesn't need friends," Zarthok replied automatically. "That's sad," Maya said. "Everyone needs friends, even aliens." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Sarah tensed, but Zarthok's security didn't react to the obvious non-threat. Maya unfolded it, revealing a child's drawing. Humans and aliens standing together under a bright sun. "I drew this when Mommy said we were going to talk to you. I thought maybe if you saw we could be nice, you'd stop hurting people." She placed the drawing on the ground between them and walked back to her mother. The simple gesture had done more to unsettle the Criterion commander than all the weapons and defiance combined. Tank seized the moment. "That's the difference between us, Commander. You see that child as a resource to exploit or a problem to eliminate. We see her as the future, worth any sacrifice to protect. You fight for empire. We fight for her right to draw pictures and dream of better days." "This changes nothing," Zarthok said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. "The Council has decided. Protocol 7 will proceed. Then we'll fight," Tank replied simply. "Not because we'll win, but because it's right. And when we're gone, our example will remain. The mighty hegemony, forced to commit genocide because they couldn't break human spirit. How many other species will see that and wonder if they could resist too?" The implications hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just about Earth anymore. This was about the entire structure of the hegemony, built on the assumption that all species would eventually submit. "You accomplish nothing with your defiance except your own destruction," Zarthok insisted. "Maybe," Tank agreed. "But I'd rather die as a free human than live as a slave. And I'm not alone. Every person here, every fighter in our tunnels, every child learning to resist, We all choose death over submission. Can your empire survive if that idea spreads? Before Zarthok could answer, alarms began blaring. Not from human forces, but from Criterion systems. David grinned as his equipment showed success. "Oh, did I mention?" he said casually. "While we've been talking, our tech teams have been busy. Every piece of Criterion equipment on Earth just received an interesting update. Nothing harmful, just a message, embedded so deep it'll take your technicians weeks to remove it completely." Screens across the facility flickered, displaying the same image, Maya's drawing, accompanied by a simple text in multiple languages. "Humanity chooses freedom." Every slave collar, every weapon, every ship system will display that message randomly, David explained. "Your own technology will remind you constantly of what you're trying to destroy. A species that values hope over fear, choice over submission, and children's dreams over empire's demands." Zarthok's rage finally boiled over. Enough! Pacification Corps, eliminate them all. But Tank had been expecting this. At his signal, hidden explosives detonated, not to kill, but to create chaos. Smoke filled the hall, electromagnetic pulses disrupted alien equipment, and the human delegation scattered according to practice plans. What followed wasn't a battle, but a demonstration. Human forces didn't try to defeat the Criterions, but showed they could engage them on equal terms. Captured alien weapons fired alongside human military equipment. Resistance fighters used alien tactics against their creators. Tank found himself face-to-face with Zarthok in the chaos. The commander's claws swept toward him, but Tank's combat experience saved him. He rolled aside, came up firing, his shots bouncing off Zarthok's personal shield, but forcing him back. "You only delay the inevitable." Zarthok roared. "Story of humanity." Tank shot back. "We've been delaying the inevitable since we climbed down from the trees. Ice ages, plagues, wars. We survived them all. You're just the latest test." Their personal duel raged through the ruined building while around them, human and Criterion forces clashed. But this wasn't the one-sided slaughter Zarthok had planned. Humans gave as good as they got, using terrain and tactics to offset technological disadvantages. Sarah led a team protecting the non-combatants. Her teacher's instincts turned to battlefield leadership. She placed the children in defensible positions with clear escape routes, older kids helping younger ones as they drilled. David worked with his tech team to turn the facility's own systems against its defenders. Doors sealed, trapping Criterion reinforcements. Environmental controls went haywire, creating advantages for humans who knew what was coming. But it was Maya who provided the battle's most surreal moment. In the middle of the fighting, she began to sing, a simple lullaby her mother used to calm her during the worst nights. Her clear, young voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Combatants on both sides paused involuntarily. The sound of innocence amidst violence was jarring, a reminder of what the fight was really about. Several Criterion soldiers actually lowered their weapons, confusion evident in their body language. Tank used the distraction to land a solid hit on Zarthok, his rifle, but connecting with what passed for the alien's jaw. The commander stumbled, shields flickering. "That's for every human you've killed," Tank growled, advancing. But before he could press his advantage, a massive explosion rocked the building. Not from the ground, but from above. Tank looked up to see Criterion orbital platforms powering up. "All human forces, scatter pattern Omega," he commanded. The evacuation was chaos, but organized chaos. Humans fled through prepared routes while laying down covering fire. They'd known this was likely a one-way mission, but Tank had planned for the possibility of escape. As they retreated into the tunnel systems, Tank took one last look at Zarthok. The commander stood amid the ruins of what was supposed to be his triumph. Maya's drawing somehow still visible on the cracked floor. "This isn't over," Tank called out. "Protocol 7 or not, humanity will survive. And we'll remember this day, not as a defeat, but as the moment we looked the galactic hegemony in the eye and said no." Then he was gone, vanishing into the underground networks that had become humanity's salvation. Behind them, orbital strikes began falling, turning the UN building and surrounding blocks into glass and ash. But the message had already spread. Across Earth, resistance cells celebrated not a military victory, but a moral one. They'd faced their conquerors as equals, shown the galaxy that humans wouldn't bow, and proven that spirit could match technology. In hidden bunkers, people watched recordings of the confrontation. They saw Tank's defiance, heard Maya's innocent questions, witnessed humans standing proud even in the face of extinction. And they prepared for the dark times ahead with renewed determination. On his command ship, Zarthok sat in brooding silence. The negotiation had been a disaster. Not only had the humans rejected terms, they'd turned it into a propaganda victory. Already, reports came in of unrest on other conquered worlds, species taking inspiration from human resistance. "Your orders, Commander?" his lieutenant asked nervously. Zarthok stared at the child's drawing he'd somehow kept. Such a simple thing, yet encapsulated everything frustrating about these humans. They could create beauty while planning destruction, show innocence while demonstrating cunning, speak of peace while waging relentless war. "Begin Protocol 7 preparations," he ordered finally. But he paused, something nagging at him. "Increase security on all occupied worlds. If the humans have taught us anything, it's that desperation breeds innovation." As Criterion forces mobilized for humanity's final destruction, Tank led his people back to safety. The battle at the UN had cost them 23 killed, many more wounded. But they'd achieved something precious. "You realize what we did today?" Sarah asked as medical teams tended the injured. "Bought time," Tank replied. "Maybe inspired others. Show the humans don't break easily." More than that, David interjected, monitoring intercepted communications. "The entire hegemony is talking about us. Some calling for our immediate destruction. Others suggesting negotiation might be better than genocide. We've created doubt." Tank allowed himself a tired smile. One Marine had started this resistance. Now millions carried it forward. Win or lose, humanity had already achieved something remarkable. They'd made the galaxy's dominant power question itself. "Get some rest," he ordered. "Tomorrow, we prepare for Protocol 7. They want to extinct us? Fine. But we'll make them work for every life, fight for every inch. And maybe, just maybe, we'll show the universe that some things are worth dying for." As his people dispersed, Tank found Maya drawing again. This time, it showed humans and aliens fighting. But in the corner, small and hopeful, she'd drawn the same scene as before, beings standing together in peace. "Maybe someday," Tank said softly. Maya looked up at him with eyes too wise for her years. "Mommy says we fight, so someday we won't have to." "Your mommy's smart," Tank agreed. "Keep drawing, little one. Someone needs to remember there's beauty worth fighting for." That night, as Earth prepared for what might be its final battle, a